this so we can post it up for those folks that couldn't make it. So don't be afraid to come on camera. Yeah. So I want to thank everybody for joining us again as our series begins to wind down. This is the last month for the MTIR Winter Web Series. We are been doing these every month. No, every other Wednesday, just about, on different topics. We've got a pretty good response and support and attendance for these. It's been a long journey, I'll say that, but it's been very much well worth it. So coming to the stage tonight is someone that I met once. He was super, super kind to me to help me talk me over the hills in 9W going up Long River Road. So he left a lasting impression on me, and he was one of the first cyclists that I met. One of the many that I asked myself, how the hell does his legs never stop? Greg Masterson is the president of the Metro Atlantic Cycling Club, better known as MACC. They are the hosting club for the infamous 17-year-long running ride known as One Love. I personally have not been to it. 2019 didn't make it because I had my own race. 2020, you know what happened. 2021 is to be determined whether or not it's going to happen. But if you guys have not heard about it, I encourage you all to Google it. It is a 3-day event. There is no cyclist that I've ever heard that's gone to this event that did not have an amazing time. You get welcome with the Southern love. I heard the fish fry on Friday night is outstanding. So without further ado, I want to introduce everyone to Greg Masterson. He's the president of MACC. He's going to be presenting tonight on gearing and shifting. As we all know, and probably don't know, that Atlanta has a lot of hills. So I think we have an expert on our hands who's going to walk us through it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to toss them in the chat or just popcorn them in and out, since we have a relatively small group. We can kind of get that one-on-one attention. Cool? Yeah. All right, Greg, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you. First, I want to thank Derica and this series and what she's doing. I'm sure it's going to grow and get even more people on, but this is great because this is the only thing like it out there. And appreciate all the work Derica's put in to making this happen. Looking at it, people, I think we have a lot of experienced cyclists. I was kind of preparing for inexperienced cyclists. So I'll just try and touch over some things, but keep it moving. I guess first thing I tell an experienced cyclist is if you're asking somebody, ask somebody who's been around. You know, people kind of, it's human nature to ask someone like yourself. So someone who's been riding 1 year is telling somebody and they don't really know. So to ask somebody who knows. So I guess my qualifications, I've been riding pretty much since 1990. I started keeping a log and I was doing 4,000 a year. And I met some guys doing brevets, ultra distance events. So like from 1996, I've been doing about 7,000 a year and just kind of settled in on that. Done some long distance. I did Boston, Montreal, Boston. I don't know if anybody does brevets. I'm a 2-time super randonnier. Meaning you've done a 300, 400, and 600 in the time limits, you know. Okay. I pick a few races here and there. I don't race a lot. I won the 45 Masters Georgia Games once. Last year, they were kind enough to have 55 and over Cat 4-5 state championship on a hilly course. So I won that and got a jersey, which is nice. But, you know, it was a good category. But anyway, just so hopefully you feel someone qualified here is talking to you. So I was going to start off and say,
hey, Greg, I only recruited the best.
Thank
you.
My
panelists.
Thank you. What are the advantages of knowing how to shift well versus not? Good shifting saves energy. If you're doing a 50-mile ride and you're shifting right on at 40 miles, you're going to have more energy left. Getting dropped. You can actually get dropped because you're in the wrong gear, because you don't know how to shift or don't know how to shift well. Your attack, even if it's just going for a county sign or something, in the perfect gear and the right sequence, you're going to go a lot faster. You'll attack and wonder, well, hey, I didn't drop anybody. What happened? Well, you might not have been in the right gear. Bad shifting is the reverse. You get tired because you're pushing the wrong gear or spinning out. You can be in the wrong situation where you're in too big of a gear and someone takes off and you can't downshift quick enough or get it turning and you can get dropped. Noise, people who don't really know, I guess a lot of times if you're in the small combination, I'll go over that later. your bike's just making a bunch of noise. Some people don't understand why and don't shift out of it. Okay, just a quick little scenario I'll give to start. I ride around Stone Mountain Park. It's a 5-mile loop. I've just ridden there for years and years and years. There's one stretch of road where you come in kind of flat, it dips, it goes up, and then it's a nice long downhill into a straight run, about 1% downhill. And I watch people ride up to it, and they're riding along the flat. On the downhill, they might hit an upshift, they might not. As they start to come up, they might downshift, maybe just stand up and get over it. And then right at the top of the hill, they'll look at the downhill and see the downhill and the run, and they'll pop an upshift. And that's the moment I lose all respect for them. I'm like, they don't know how to ride the bike. They don't know how to shift. I thought they were good. I really liked that person. And now they're nobody. And just, you ought to know how to shift a little better than that. That's what I think. So I'll come back to that. I guess some folks know, some don't. 9 out of 10 people, they just do it. Every time they see that downhill and pop an upshift and slow down. Okay, I'll come back to that. First, I guess, is the equipment. Behind me, this is ETAP, and down below, which I guess you can't see, this is Ultegra mechanical. They're both 11 speed. They both work just fine. Huh? Any questions? No, okay.
I'm just gonna make sure everyone's muted, so Terry, continue on.
Okay. Do we have any real beginners here? No.
Looks like Lorene from Chicago said that she's a beginner.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just go over this
This
then.
is Dawn. I'm a beginner as well. I live
Okay.
in Newport News, Virginia.
Okay. You got some clients. The two front shifters, the right side and the left side. The right side controls, well, it depends on what shifting you have. For SRAM ETAP, the right side is an upshift and the left side is the downshift. Up and down, what that means is an upshift makes it harder to pedal and it will shift to a smaller cog. This terminology, these are your cogs. This is an 1126 and they go up to 1133. I mean, they're getting really big these days. 36. And these are your rings. And your rings, this is a 5034 and they're different combinations, but typically it's a big ring, small ring. And then these are your cogs. And the smaller the cog, the harder it is to pedal. The bigger the ring, the harder it is to pedal. And the more ground you cover, the faster you'll go. So if you're a real beginner, what I suggest, go in the small ring and just use your right hand and shift. If you have like a Shimano, you can just use your right hand, upshift and downshift, and just stay in there. If you're on a big downhill, that's when you might need to go to the big ring, but you can just tuck and coast and you learn how to shift. And the basic thing to learn is shifting through your cassette, your cogs. And the point of shifting is to pretty much maintain, say 90 RPM, 80 RPM, whatever RPMs you feel like riding. I mean, really 80 to 90 is kind of the magic range. And if you're slowing down to 50 and pushing up, you're wasting energy. It's hard on your legs. If you keep it at 90, as you go up a hill, you shift in an easier gear, you slow down, you shift to easier gear, slow down, easier gear, till you're in the easiest one, and you keep your leg speed, you save energy. You're not maxing out your legs and trying to push too hard. If you want to stand up and push it, downshift and do that. But mainly what you're trying to do is maintain a steady rhythm and don't stress yourself. And if someone's beginning, just get in the small ring and shift a lot. Anytime the terrain changes, you start to go down, hit the upshift. When you start to go up, hit the upshift. I mean the downshift when you're starting to go up a hill, and hit it, take a few pedals, hit it, take a few pedals, and just try to keep your leg speed the same. If your legs are starting to slow down, hit it, And really you want to get it kind of before they slow down. So you keep working at it until you can get the shift before your legs bog down. And the rings, a lot of people now, I guess if you buy a bike now, it'll probably have a mid compact. And they're talking about the size of the rings. I have a 50-34, which is called a compact. And the pros ride a standard, which is a 53-39. Now, what that means is they're bigger gears, so they have to push a bigger gear. They have to be stronger. For most of us on this call, a compact is probably best because there's not going to be a situation where we need that 53. And a 53 to 50 is a slight difference. If you have a downhill sprint to win your local race, which an organizer should not have a downhill sprint, that's too dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, you know, you really don't need a 53 unless you're that strong. And if you're spinning out a 50-11, it's time to tuck because you're probably going 35 at 100.
Because your sound went, Greg.
Hold on, Greg. Are you there?
Greg,
Compact if you have a choice.
Oh, there he's back now. He's back now.
Yeah.
I was lost.
We lost the sound, so we lost you right after you said no one should be doing a downhill race.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is if you have a choice, I'd get a compact. That's what I would recommend. If your bike comes with a mid compact, that's fine. And the offset is the cassette. I was riding with someone today and they have the SRAM ASX.
yeah. Yeah, the sound went again.
Oh, no.
Hey, Greg, I think your sound went again.
Dang, I'm not on mute.
There you are. It's
Okay.
I think it might be an internet connectivity thing.
I hope not. I'll
If
keep
it
going.
continues, then we'll just may have to switch over to have you call in on the phone number instead if it continues. But we can manage for now.
Okay, let me know.
Okay.
So those are the chain rings. The cassettes can come in anything from, like I said, the SRAM ASX has a 10 tooth, which turns a lot of wheel. There's a thing called a gear inch chart. I guess some of you have seen them, some haven't. And it's a chart that has the teeth on your cog and the size of your ring and how many inches you turn in one pedal stroke. So like here, I'm in a 50, probably a 17. So in one turn, that might be 83 inches. So it's just a reference point. The only thing kind of valuable is if you went to the small ring and clicked down 2 gears, you would probably also be at 83 inches. So there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah. The volume
Chris,
is
Chris, do you have the dial-in number?
I have to go look for it.
Can you do that? Because I want to make sure everyone
no
gets captures the information.
No problem.
Am I in?
You're fading in and out. Chris is going to retrieve the phone number so you can dial in on the phone, but
Okay.
we'll still be able to see you on the Zoom call.
Okay. So you give me a number to call?
Yeah, he's going to look it up now. But
Okay.
in the meantime, does anybody have any questions about? I know we have some newbies that were on a call. Do you guys have any questions about the gearings, the size, the standard, the compact, big compact? I mean, it's a safe space, so we can fire away the questions however you guys want.
Yeah. I guess the biggest difference in cassettes, if you have a tighter cassette, they used to say racers would use a tighter cassette, meaning it might be an 1123, 1126, and it's a smaller increment every time you shift a gear. It's very slight. If you live in a flatter area like Florida, you're in a 1% up or 1% down, so you don't want a big jump. So you want a smaller, tighter cassette. So when you have subtle changes in terrain, your gears are making subtle changes with each gear shift. If you have like an 1133, it's a big range. So you still have 11 cogs that go to a much higher number. So say 1126, you have an 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 21. But one tooth changes are real subtle. And then as you get into the bigger, you'll have 2 or 3 tooth changes. But if you have an 1133, when you start to move up, you'll have 5 teeth in one change, which is a big difference. So some people don't like that and they'll keep a tighter cassette. Some people it doesn't bother. And that way, like he can stay in the big ring all day because he has a 1033. So he has a bigger change when it moves up. But some people are okay with that and some people like it. I like a tighter cassette with smaller changes, and I can get away with it because I have a 34 with a compact crank. If you had bigger chain rings, then when you need your easiest gear, it wouldn't be easy enough depending on where you go. Like I'm pretty good
great.
unless I go.
So I have a question.
Okay.
I've heard people say, even when I started riding in New York, that people always tell me that you don't need a compact here in New York, or you don't need, a standard because you're not that strong. Or does it determine where you live and the terrain that you're riding on? Does that determine what size crank that you should get, whether it be a compact, mid-compact, or standard?
It determines more your cassette than your crank. You can kind of get away with any crank. Your strength should be the big determination on the crank, because to turn a bigger crank, you need to be stronger. Actually, I think everybody can ride a compact. I just
really
do. Yes.
And you won't find them spinning out, like just constantly spinning. I know Chris had a compact, and he had to change it to a mid compact because he was constantly in the big ring spinning.
If you're spinning out a 5011, you're going over 35 miles an hour. How many people ride 35 on flat ground? Not many. If you're going down a hill, it's time to tuck. People aren't pulling 40 miles an hour down a hill, very seldom. If you're going 40, you tuck, you're going to be going as fast. If your tuck is decent, put your knees right on the top to get elbows in and get low. And you're going to be going 40. So the fact that you really need 3 more teeth on your big ring, and when you look at the Gearings chart, it's not much. What makes a difference is the 11, or if you had a 10, that's a big difference. And depending on where you live, back to your question, if you live somewhere with a lot of hills or steep hills, you should get a big.
Oh no. Sorry about this, guys. Greg, we lost you again.
Can you hear me?
Now we
No,
can.
you froze. Okay. Yeah,
We missed that last part.
Okay. The size of your cassette should be determined by where you live and how hilly it is. If you have some steep hills, you should get a big cassette with like a 32 or bigger as your biggest cog. And even as a beginner, if you have a 32 and a 34 in the front, you'll be able to get up the steepest hill. And even as someone, if you go to the mountains, if you go into the mountain summit, there'll be times that you have a prolonged climb of 8%, 10%. And that's where you've got to have an easy gear, or else you'll be standing up grinding it or won't be able to do it. And the opportunity to spin. So if you're going to the mountains, if you have 10% grades around where you live, I'd say get a 32 cassette as your biggest tooth in your cassette. So I guess if someone's on this thing and saying, man, I don't, my gears aren't right for where I live, and it's cheaper, you just go get another cassette that's bigger. Your derailleur, if it's a long cage, you can handle any size cassette. If it's a short cage and you buy a 32, it might not work. So consult your mechanic, but usually just getting another cassette will give you extra gears, and that's what you'll need to get up the steeper hills. And as far as downhills, I think you're going to be okay with anything, because you're going to have an 11 or a 10 with ASX. You'd actually, the proof of it is with the SRAM ASX, when they put that 10 tooth, the chain rings are like a 48, 32. They had to reduce the size of the chain rings because nobody can turn a 5310. So all these big gears that people have, it sounds macho. Oh, I
Yeah.
got to have this big gear. Not really, you know, because I've been riding this for 15 years in everything I do, whether it's racing mountains or whatever. I've never felt like I needed more gear than a 5011.
You might be the only man on this call that feels that way. I kind of question.
I would agree with that. This is Daryl. I would agree with that. I think I've been in the mountains with both a compact and a mid compact, and I think what made the difference for me was that cassette in the back. And on two different occasions, you know, he talked about having like a bigger range in the back. I find for me that didn't work as well, because when he talks about those large jumps in kind of 5 teeth, although it's adequate maybe for the pitch, it breaks my rhythm. It doesn't give me the subtle changes I need when the pitch changes 1 or 2%. If I switch to one of those bigger chain rings, it becomes too easy. And now I'm not getting any traction or moving anywhere. And then if I go down one, it becomes too hard. Whereas if I get a tighter cog range in the back, I can make subtle changes. So for me, the advantage was going with a compact in the front and a tighter range in the back, because I was more comfortable that way.
We're on the same
But I did
page.
okay with the mid compact. It just wasn't my preference. It kind of threw me off.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's, and some people, those little changes are important. Other people deal better with a big change, but there'll be a certain situation where it will break your rhythm. Any other questions?
I mean, it's all about rhythm if you're climbing for an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
Or more.
Like
Yeah.
10 miles, I suspect. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to just to pop in or put them in the chat if you feel more comfortable typing in
Okay.
there.
Okay, what else did I have? Saving energy. That small ring right hand. Oh, I guess now shifting patterns. Shifting patterns, it's what helps keep you in that same rhythm. If your pattern isn't good, or if you break your pattern, you have too big of a jump. So the things that'll affect your shifting pattern or break your rhythm is whenever you change rings, because whether you're going from a 50 to a 34 or a 52 to a 36, that's a big change. So if you're just riding along and you change with your front derailleur, that's a radical change. So you have to do something to adjust for that. So what everybody typically does, if you're riding along and you shift from your big ring to your small ring, immediately you shift to a smaller cog to make the change not as big. So in the front, you're going to a small ring, which makes it a lot easier. If you do nothing, your cadence will go to just spinning crazy. So to stop that, you'll hit 1 or 2. Actually, with the compact, I started doing 2. So whenever I shift to the small ring, I immediately shift down 2 cogs. And then the whole thing didn't change much. Now, why would I do that? It's because I see the hill coming, or I'm getting to the bottom part of the hill and I know it's going to go up for a while and I'm going to need that small ring before I get to the top, because I'll go up the hill and keep getting easier and easier gear. But in the big ring, I'm going to run out. So since I know I got to go to the small ring, I'll wait until I'm kind of at the bottom part of the hill and then shift to the small ring and immediately shift down 2 in the back. And then I don't lose rhythm, but I'm in the small ring. So as I climb longer and steeper, I can just start shifting to an easier cog in the back. So as you crest the hill and start to go down, you get your leg speed up, and then you shift to the big ring and click up a couple. Because when you shift to the big room, you're going to slow down and lose rhythm. So you shift up a couple, and that keeps your rhythm there. And then slowly you start to get harder and harder as you go down the hill. Another instance is standing, sitting or standing. If you're riding along and you decide to stand up, when you stand, you hit the upshift. So as soon as you stand, you hit the upshift, because when you stand, you got more leverage on the pedals. If you're riding along and there's a slight hill, so you're flat and it's going to 4%, but it's not very long. You know, just a little quick one where you're going to be able to get over it. So instead of upshifting, well, you can stand up and upshift one gear and stand up the hill and go over it. Or if the hill's changing, you can stand and not shift, because it's the same effect, because the hill is going to make it harder, just like you would shift that and make it harder. So I think I'm making this confusing, but if you're riding along and you're going to stand, pop a upshift to keep the same rhythm. If you're riding along and you're going into a hill and it's a short hill and you just want to roll over it, you can stand up a little bit, roll over it, sit back down and not shift. But that's only if you're playing the hill just right and you want to put that extra work for standing up in.
I think so are you implying that it's about keeping a consistent resistance or pressure on the pedals so that you don't lose momentum? Right? Because if you stand in too easy a gear, then you'll start spinning and you'll lose. Right. You don't have enough resistance, you'll lose your momentum. You may get dropped off the group, or you may not make it over the hill smoothly.
Right. And I guess the difference between sitting and standing, if you're just riding along, versus going into a hill. If you're going into a hill and you want to stand, whenever you stand, you need more gear. That's the main thing, because when you stand, you got more leverage on the pedals. So when you stand, typically you upshift, and when you sit down, you downshift. The only exception to that is if you're rolling into a hill.
Right.
And it's a short hill, so you just stand up because you have the extra resistance there. So you stand up to muscle over the hill, and then you sit down when you get over it, as opposed to if you were on flat, you would hit an upshift when you stand up and a downshift when you sit down.
I'll drop a little nugget in here. I don't know if you were gonna cover that or not, but for those of you on the call who have electronic shifting, especially Shimano, there is some of the newer ones have they have an option you can put, like configure in your electronic shifting, that does that for you. And it's kind of a hidden race feature, so that when you shift, especially when you shift in the front, it automatically moves the back 1 or 2 cogs. It does that for you. And the purpose is exactly what Greg's talking about, is that it keeps a consistent resistance on, so that you don't lose momentum in pedaling, because it's a big shift from a 50 to a 34 or a 53 to a 39. So it's a huge change. So they're compensating by moving the back simultaneously 1 or 2 cogs.
Right.
And if you're in a race, you don't want to have to double shift, because you could drop your chain, or you could get it stuck, or you could tear your derailleur off. So it does it for you.
Yeah.
I don't know if SRAM does that. I haven't experimented with it yet, but I know Shimano has it.
Yeah, I have ETAP and it does not. I don't know if the ASX does or it doesn't. But,
yeah, I have ETAP as well. I don't think it does. I think what SRAM has is they have a configuration that will prevent cross chaining. So they'll prevent you from going into your 2 smallest cogs while you're in your large. I think you can configure that. I know you can on the Axis, but I know Shimano has that feature where you can auto shift. Right. So if you move from your front, if you move your front, it will adjust your back to compensate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and somebody put in the chat, do I know how to set it up? I don't, because I don't ride any Shimano. I ride Campy and SRAM. So sorry, I just have friends who ride that, who told me that works. But if you Google it, I'm sure you can quickly find it. YouTube has everything. And if you don't, you can hit me on the side and I'll figure it out for you.
So,
I had
so
VI2
Greg,
for a while, and my local shop would offset that. I didn't want it because I'm a purist, so I'll do the 2 shifts. And there
Right,
are
right.
some occasions when you're pressing a hill where you might not want it to do it, but
That's true.
for 90
That's true.
time, it's a good thing to have.
Yeah, that's
Erica?
true.
yes, I was going to say we have a question in the chat from Alberta.
Okay.
She has a question of when shifting from large to small gears, front gears, does it make a difference in shifting your back gears first? And I've heard my husband tell me this 1,000 times, like, don't change the front before you change the back. You're going to ruin your gears. It's like, it's a bike. It should work that way. The shifters, he says.
My opinion is no. In the older groups, you know, they were a little more sensitive. I'll get into this in a minute, but the newer ones, in my opinion, you're not going to ruin anything. You're not going to wear your chain out any noticeably faster. So it just depends. But typically, I change the front rings and then hit the back. I'll almost do it at the same time. With E-tap, you can hit it and hold it or just click it real quick. So you should do it as close to the same time as possible. And I always do front first, but I don't see where shifting the rear and then the front would make much difference. You might lose a little more momentum that way, but if you do it close enough together, you're not gonna, I don't think, have any detrimental effects. But
All
you
right.
know,
Thank you.
okay. I just had a thought.
Anybody else have any questions?
Patterns, the stand-in. Well, just go over a couple of scenarios. You'll see someone riding along in a pace line, and you'll see people in different cadences. You know, I guess the ideal cadence is 90, 80 to 90. But if you see someone 70, and a lot of new riders, they start off pedaling slow, and if you tell them to spin, they say, well, I can't feel it. You know, I don't like that. And of course, you know, we know you have to learn to spin, and you'll never be fast if you're not turning the gear. If you're going 50 RPM, you can improve. If you're going 90 RPM, you can upshift and go faster. So the thing I always tell beginners is when you learn to spin and you add more gear to it, you'll get faster. If you're not turning it, you're not going to get faster. So also, if you're in too big of a gear and say someone behind you goes by the time you wind up that gear up to speed, they're gone. So that's where being in a big gear, it can get you dropped because you can't react. If you're spinning at 90, you can accelerate faster, then hit an upshift, accelerate, hit an upshift, and you're on a wheel in the draft, everything's good. Otherwise, there's a big gap, you're trying to close it. So, you know, this is on one of those rides.
So Greg, I was not taught or instructed or given guidance to stay out of my big ring unless I'm trying to close a gap, particularly on a flat where I can really build up my momentum unless I'm going downhill. But I, you know, for the past couple of years, I've been really working on staying in the smaller ring and just really rotating the ones in the back. And that's the advice I've been most given by some of the seasoned cyclists that I ride with.
Yeah, I kind of like, I mean, the intent of it is to learn how to spin and to be spinning almost all the time. So there is always, it depends. If you're someone who's riding on a 15-mile-an-hour ride, then yes, you're in the small ring. But that wouldn't apply if you were in a 22-mile-an-hour pace line comfortably, you know, and then someone takes it to 28, you can get spun out in the small ring. So I don't really like to say rings, but the intent of it is to be turning at 90 RPMs. And usually, yeah, for most people, they're going to be in the small ring. So yeah, I'd say it's good to stay in the small ring and don't get out unless, you know, you start to get faster and you really have to. So I'd say that's good advice as long as it lasts. But
Okay.
Yeah, and everybody should learn how to spin, and you can mash it once in a while, but basically you look at the pros, they're spinning. You know, Primoz Roglic, he makes me sick. He attacked on Paris-Nice yesterday and you're looking at him and you're screaming at the TV, upshift. Come on, man, upshift. When he lost the time trial at the tour, I'm like, upshift. But he can do it. He can spin up a mountain in a gear 90 to 100 RPM. And he was 4th in the tour. He won the stage the other day. So learning how to spin is a big advantage. And then someday your knee is going to hurt. We all get older. Your knees are going to hurt. Spinning heals them. You know, you can keep going. And, you know, when you have an injury, whether it's an ankle, a knee, or almost any kind of injury, you can go out and ride your bike because you can spin. You can't run. You can't push a hard gear, but you can go out and spin, and it heals you, and it just doesn't put pressure on your joints and all of those things. So learning how to spin is something that's just, it's invaluable. And even when things get faster, you can spin up and catch someone easier than you can crank that big gear up to speed. So yeah, everybody should. And if it takes riding in a small ring to do it, then do it. Because, you know, some people aren't disciplined enough and they'll just go to the harder rings. So, or the harder gear.
So there's a question in the chat that's coming from Camille, and she wants to know, what do you mean by learn how to spin? You could expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. When most new riders start riding, if there's you can get a cadence thing, where there's a little magnet on your crank and it passes something and it tells you how many rotations a minute. So when you're pedaling, if you're doing 90 pedals in a minute, that's pretty much spinning. 90, 100, you're really spinning. Most people, and you can count it, you know, just to know where you're at. But if you are doing 60 RPMs a minute, that's not spinning. That's just turning the cranks over kind of slow. And as a beginner, if you start going faster, you'll start bouncing on the seat. And that means you hit your threshold. So if at 65 RPMs, you're kind of bouncing, then you know you need to work on it. Go to 64 RPMs as long as you can until you can do it without bouncing. And then try to get to 70 RPMs where you can sit smoothly and turn. And it takes time to spin. It helps me to pull on the backstroke of the pedal, because most people push down. There's excellent riders, there's racers. They push down. You can hear them, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And they're strong, they can do it. But if you pull through the back of your stroke, when you're coming down through the bottom, pull your heel into the heel of the shoe. Through the bottom of the stroke, try to pull your heel out of the back of your shoe. Or some people say it's like you're scraping mud off your shoe. And it uses your hamstring. Most people's hamstrings just go to waste. They just ride all quads. But as you pull through the bottom and you start to pull up, or at least unweight as you come up the backside, that helps you spin. And those things will help you get a rounder pedal stroke, a better pedal stroke. You'll use more of your leg muscles. You'll save energy. But yeah, as a beginner, whatever you're pedaling fast and start to bounce a little bit, go right below that and just keep working on it and keep working on it and keep working on it until you can spin really fast comfortably, and just sit there on the bike and your upper body's not moving, you're not bouncing, and just work at that until you can do it.
It also builds your lung capacity. I remember one of the guys in the Iron Riders took me under his wing, or I don't know, could have been a death march at the time. He would make me go out and do hill repeats in the easiest gears that I had, just to blow my lungs completely out. And I thought I was going to die, but you know, as the years went on, I started to understand the technique that he was trying to teach me, like learn how to spin your legs at all costs, so you never have to go into the big ring when you do need to chase somebody down and catch them. So
yeah,
it makes sense.
And from watching pro cycling over the years, Lance really kind of started spinning when he would race against Ulrich. Ulrich was kind of old school, and Ulrich might be 80 RPM, and Lance was winding it up to 90 and 100. And I took it to mean the last frontier of going faster is it's cardio. The legs are only can do so much. You know, to push that 70, you can need a stronger leg. And your legs can, if they get too strong, they get too big, it slows it down as a cyclist. So cardio is where the gains can be made. course, Lance had a little help with the Dr. Ferrari, but nonetheless, that's where the gains can be made. Getting the cardio, getting your blood up, your hematocrit up, but you know, your cardio is the final frontier, because you can just keep working on it and keep getting better, and you can get your wind up. And you know, I'm 60 and I don't feel, you know, of course you get out of breath, but I always did. So my legs are small and they're always going to be, and that's it. But I think the cardio can improve, and you can just work on it and get that spin and do the hills and get your breathing hard, and then recover, get your breathing back down when you recover. So that can always be worked on. Leg strength, I think, is kind of finite. Just my thing. And then when you watch the pros now, you see that's where they're going, from Lance, you know, on up to now, and watching Rodlick ride. So yeah, I'd say spin and work on cardio.
Yeah, that is true.
I think there's a lot to be said, and I like that topic of conversation, because I think if you work on that, you have more options when you are on the road, right? Because you touched on it a little bit about, you might not feel good one day, or your legs might be hurting, or your knee might be hurting, or you may just be on a long ride where you have to balance between the two, right? You have to know who you are that day, right? So if the ride is getting fast and you're trying to mash it, you ain't gonna last that long. But if you can spin or switch it up or move between the two, you may be able to last a little longer, right? But if you're a one-trick pony, so to speak, if all you do is mash it, you don't have an option. When the mashing is done, the ride is done.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question based on what Daryl just mentioned. So sometimes, yes, like and I've tried this for myself. Like if I'm spinning and I feel like at some point getting out of breath, or even my heart rate is too high, if I go down a gear or so and just slow down my cadence, that I'll be able to like recover a little bit more. So is there, but I think my real question is though, because sometimes there's cross chaining involved. So as far as like choosing your right gear and recovering, what's the recommendation with that?
I missed the first half of the question.
Oh, you did?
I got the cross training. Daryl can fill in for me real quick if he wants.
I hear what you're saying, and I think what I personally try to do is I always try to find that sweet spot, and I think that it was important that he mentioned that cadence is important. The thing about spinning is that yes, it builds up lung capacity, but you also build up, you know, the cardiovascular or the anaerobic strength to continue spinning, right? So when I switch gears, because maybe my legs are sore or I'm feeling tense, I still try to maintain my cadence. I'm not changing my cadence. I'm trying to change the resistance in the bike so that I can get relief one way or another. If my lungs are hurting or my lung capacity can't withstand it, then I'm trying to move to something that puts a little bit more pressure on my legs, but I'm not trying to go so far down the gearing that it's now too hard for me to keep close. So that is to say that regardless of where I'm moving the gears, and that's why I talked a little bit earlier, that's why I like those close ranges in my gearing, because I can move one cog and one tooth is not going, it's going to give me a little relief, but it's not going to change so much that now my cadence has been impacted. If that makes sense, right? If you had, it's almost like, if you think about it this way, don't think about the back cog, think about the front two. When you move from your big ring to your small ring, if you're on a ride that's say going 20 plus miles an hour and you're sitting in there and you need to be in your big chain ring, if you go in your small chain ring, there's a good chance that you're not holding on to that ride anymore because it's too big of a change. So in order to compensate for that, you're either going to have to turn your cadence up really high, or you're gonna have to, like, I don't know what the other option is. I mean, switch a few in the back, but now you're playing around with gears. So I try to do kind of micro changes that give me the relief I need without major changes in my cadence. Cadence is very important, and I think it's one of the things that people don't focus on enough. It's part of the reason why I have a track bike or a fixed gear or a single speed, because it trains me to kind of keep pedaling, trains me to keep my cadence high. So I practice that, just so that in those situations I'm able to handle it. I hope that answers your question.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm sorry I was out of pocket for a little bit, trying to figure out how to find a call number. Sorry. Hey, Andre, and Daryl hit it on the head. You know, kind of where I lived in that field of performance and of training, but so your anaerobic system and aerobic system, right? One is the short energy system. One is the long energy system. The aerobic capacity is where you get most of your fuel burned through, right? Where your blood carries oxygen to your muscles and carbohydrates, so forth and so on. Anaerobic is a shorter energy system. You have access to that maybe 20 minutes. After that is your aerobic system. But guess what? The two pays the cost as you ride. The higher you spin, you're going to use your aerobic capacity. That's what you train when you do your training rides. Predominantly, when you do your base miles, you're spinning out there, not heavy work, but just spinning, doing, I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hour ride, 3 hour rides, just spinning. That's what you work on your aerobic capacity. Your anaerobic capacity comes in on those HIIT trainings where it's like, you know, you're doing VO2 maxes, or you're doing it for 30 seconds, or you're doing FTP tests for 20 minutes. That's the anaerobic system. That's where you use your glycogen from your liver. That's when you use your energy from your muscles itself. So the spinning that I was talking about, that should be your main focus in your base training or in your training. And the anaerobic stuff you can do different times of the week or different times of the month. That will come. But, and again, the anaerobic system uses the aerobic system for its energy. That's where it pulls from. They both work together. You know, it doesn't work in isolation, obviously. So that's why a guy like, I'm gonna give somebody who everybody would know, I don't know, a guy like Josh, for example. You guys don't know who Josh is. Josh is a young racer. He can actually ride longer distances, but he's a track guy. But actually, when he gets on the road, he does pretty well. He's built up those two to a very high level. So, you know, it's what you train when you do training. That's what you end up doing on the road. So, like Daryl says, both areas, spin more than less.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you're doing long distance, like when I was doing the brevets, you know, these rides might last 12 hours, 31 hours. The people who push the harder gear, their feet start to hurt. They just start hurting all over. The people who spin, they feel better after all of that time. So, you know, even if it's a century or whatever, the longer you're on it, the more you spin, the easier you're taking it on your body, and the better you'll feel hour after hour. It does make a difference.
Yeah, I think somebody told me once that cycling is a sport it's a sport of attrition.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you got to try and last, and it's all about energy conservation. The longer the ride, the longer the race, it's all about the people who are smart in the beginning, right? Those are the people who win in the end or finish.
You'll just feel better. Yep.
If they make it.
They will make it that way. Funny. Yep.
Does anybody else have any questions? They want to hop in now?
I have a question for Greg. Greg, what is your strategy if you're riding on a level and you're going into a hill? And I see some riders, they'll stand up and they'll ride hard into the hill for a while, and then they'll sit. And one time I was doing that, and a guy came up next to me and he said, "Oh, you should be sitting. It's more efficient. Don't stand up the hill." And how do you handle each hill, whether you're standing or sitting? And it confuses me sometimes.
Yeah, I try to just go into the hill steady. What I hate is when I'm on a group ride and someone goes fast early, because I always kind of want to get to the top, you know, first, or at least with the group. But ideally, I want to go into it seated and steady, and go into it until it gets steep enough where I have to downshift, and then downshift. And if it's a long hill, I might stand up and just kind of get loose and then sit down and downshift again. If there's a steep pitch, you know, if it's kind of a stair step climb, I might stand up on the steeper parts. And then as soon as I get off of that, sit down and downshift. Neal's Gap in North Georgia, part of the 6 Gap, it has switchbacks. And on the switchbacks, it gets steeper. So when I go into the switchback, I'll pop a upshift and stand up through the switchback. And once I get through it and it kind of isn't as steep, then I'll sit down and downshift. Typical rolling hills around town, I generally want to wait till the end and stand up and go to the top. You know, I'll wait until maybe I'm 3/4 of the way up the hill and then stand up over it and sit down. So it's little things that just tricks you play in your head. But sometimes if I stand up and I can't make it to the top and sit down, I feel defeated. So I try to wait until I know I can finish it standing up. Unless it's a long climb, then I'm just going to get up and down throughout it. And other people are different. When you watch pros like Chris Horner, he could stand up for a whole mountain. Alberto Contador, 3 mountains to go. He's 2K into a 7-mile climb and he's just standing up.
Huh.
Like standing up for most people costs more energy. So when you stand up, it's when you're willing to use some more energy and waste a little bit, or just to change the rhythm. You know, you can get tired of sitting down. But for most people, seated is more efficient. And then, you know, you just kind of stand up at the steeper parts or to kind of crest it at the end.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, Greg.
Sorry. Go ahead, Derek.
No, I was going to just say there's a question in the chat from Lisa. She's asking, so do you upshift when standing and then shift back down?
No, I'll upshift and stand. And then when I sit, I shift back down.
Yeah.
Whenever I sit down, I'm popping a downshift because I've given up that leverage I had.
Hey.
So when you sit, you go to an easier gear and then you can maintain the momentum. Because standing gives you more leverage so you can push harder. But then when you sit, you lost that leverage. So then you hit make it a little easier with the click.
Oh, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
My question is, if I'm about to climb a hill and I'm going already in a hard gear, I shouldn't be in that hard of a gear that I can stand in and climb. In other words, I should be going at an easy enough pace where I can shift up and then stand, and then be able to sit down and shift back down to where I was, right?
I'd say don't think so much about standing or sitting. As you're going into it, if you're going into it in a hard gear, you're going to have to get to an easier gear sooner or later. So if you keep the hard gear and stand up, you're going to kind of blow up in the middle of it probably. So I would try and get in, you know, you don't want to lose momentum. You don't just all of a sudden go into an easy gear, but I'd work my way into easier gears as I'm going up the hill. And then the standing up is, if you want to, if you're going to stand up to crest it, hit an upshift and go all the way over the hill. Or if you're, like I said, on a mountain with switchbacks, you can stand up through the steeper part. Or if the hill has steeper parts, stand up through the steeper parts and then sit back down. But going into the hill, I usually don't stand up early, unless it's real steep early or something. But yeah, I'd prefer to go into it sitting down.
You know,
Does that help?
I think it's important to distinguish between hills and mountains.
yeah.
When you start talking about switchbacks, when you start talking about switchbacks, we're talking about long, prolonged climbs, and that is where that comment about standing and energy conservation really come into play. If you know you're going to be climbing for 3, 4, 5, 7 miles, 10 miles, you ain't going to be doing a lot of standing because you're going to pay for it at some point. Like, you need to know these climbs and if you're talking about a hill and you're in a ride with momentum, then, you know, there are lots of ways to get over that hill. I mean, momentum will carry you a quarter of the way up, half the way up. You just need to be in the right gear to continue that momentum. And if you get to the top, which is a common tactic, which Greg mentioned, is that people stand so that when they crest with power, they crest strong and they go over with momentum. You don't get to the top of it and, you know, you're exasperated looking for a gear to go down in. So you need to like roll into that hill comfortably and know that you can continue your momentum through that hill. Because chances are, if you're rolling with momentum, it's going to carry you some part way up the hill. You just need to be in a gear that you can continue that momentum, right? You don't want to get to a point where you go from 19 miles an hour to 15 miles an hour, then you're searching for gears.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out how to like keep your bike moving.
Hey, before guys, I just want to just a real quick comment that I'm about to jump off this call. Derek will be taking over. Hey, Contador, you mentioned something about Contador, Greg. Most people here probably don't know who he is. It's a pro rider. For a guy like me, this is what I study, you know, people's, I don't know, lung capacity. This guy training, he rides for 1.5 hours. Listen to this, 1.5 hours. 1 hour of it, it's standing. I can't believe someone rides that long up a hill standing. This is why he trains. So when he's in a normal train, when he's in a race, he can stand for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, no problem. But besides that, I gotta go, guys. See y'all later. Take care. I know, I'm the weird guy.
All right. Any questions? No. Okay.
All right. So I know, again, you guys always say that I'm really respectful of everyone's time. It is 6:37 or 8:30 in New York now in Eastern time. So if you guys have any other questions, you want to pop them over to Greg or even Daryl, who's here as well. I invite you guys to ask the questions now. Greg, did you have any other topics that you want to cover in case folks want to stay on?
I wanted to finish that scenario that I started.
Okay.
In Stone Mountain, they run, they go down the hill, they come up, and then they pop the upshift, which as they're at the crest of the hill, typically they're at their lowest cadence and their lowest speed, and they pop it, they can't turn it. What they should do is go down about halfway, pick up the speed, and then hit the upshift. That's you know, the way to do it. So it's a scenario that a lot of people, they make that mistake. Right when you get to the top of that hill, you're thinking, I'm gonna upshift and go, but you're not there yet. Crest the hill, start down, build up the speed, then hit the upshift. Then I'll have respect for you as you ride around Stone Mountain.
I'll put that into play when I come down to One Love next year or this year, or
Right.
whatever. All right.
I appreciate everybody coming and hanging out. Daryl, thanks for all the help too.
Hang on, Greg. We got one more question for you that just came into the chat before you go.
Okay.
And it is from, I got to scroll up, it's coming up kind of quick now. From Fabio, how do you avoid cross chaining while practicing spinning?
I guess it's, if you're in the big ring and you know it's going to get harder, so you shift to an easier cog until you're cross chaining. So it's the decision point when you go to the small ring. So when I get it to about the middle of the cassette and I know I'm not going to be able to get this over this hill in the big ring, that's when I shift to the small ring. And then I'm in the middle of the cassette, and I'll up a couple, but I'll stay generally in the middle of the cassette by timing your shift to the small ring or the big ring at the right time. As you start downhill and you're starting to spin out of the small ring, don't wait until you've cross-chained. Go to the big ring when you need to. So it's just timing when you switch rings, and don't do it too late. You'll know when you're too late because then you're cross-chaining. So this time the front shift probably a little sooner.
I do, sadly say I do cross chaining sometimes. I have to catch myself when I look down at my gears. And I know it's
Yeah,
the
and
wrong
you'll
thing
hear
to
that
do.
noise when you go small, small. So when you hear the noise, then you'll know. Get
Yeah,
up,
that's
up,
my
up.
indicator
Yep.
every time. Does anybody else have any other questions for Greg before we part our ways for the evening? Or Daryl, or anybody? Feedback? The recording is going to be shared on our YouTube channel. Iron Writers, Major Taylor Iron Writers has a YouTube channel. I've been sharing all the recordings on there in case you want to go back and review or listen to it again or share it with someone. You're more than welcome to do so. Last call before we wind it down. Thanks, Bart.
All right.
Greg, I want to thank you sincerely for doing this. It was a long time coming, but I will probably tap into your shoulder again to do it again when we do our series for next fall.
Okay, my pleasure.
This is great.
enjoyed
I
it a
hope to
lot.
see.
Thanks,
I
Greg.
Weight
appreciate
Wings
you.
want like lightweight tips for your bike.
Oh.
Yeah, I count every gram. Every gram.
You're what they call a weight
Oh,
weenie?
you a weight weenie? Greg, I didn't know that. You a weight weenie? I did not know that. I don't count grams. I just rather pass on one of those Snickers or whatever it is. Don't buy the Oreos. It's far cheaper. It's far cheaper to not buy the Oreos than to buy lighter components.
That's true.
This is true.
Next time you're racing Greg, look out for being hit by a water bottle towards the finish. When he's
That's right. Gotta get rid of that. At least dump the water out.
Exactly.
Wow. All right.
All right.
Sorry, gotta go back here. So again, okay, you guys. So I want to wrap this up because I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to thank Greg. Primarily, you've been amazing. You know how much I appreciate this, and I will be calling you again. To everybody that showed up tonight, you guys know I appreciate you showing up and supporting what we're doing here. To invite everyone to come out to get the information that we are sharing with everyone. And on behalf of the Major Taylor Iron Writer Board, I say thank you to everyone. That's all we got. So tune in. We have a couple more left before the end of the month. Men's session, women's session, and there's something else, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Just keep an eye out on our Facebook page. If we have any other questions, you can feel free to email me at majortaylorironwriters@gmail.com. That's it, folks. Have a good night. Get some rest.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Thanks.